Thank you, Lee and Pam. That was a really wonderful arrangement of one hymn I don't know and another that's an old favorite of mine. Thank you. There are a lot of stories in the New Testament about Jesus healing people. And in some ways, this one is no different, especially when Jesus goes out to the crowds and heals them and gets rid of the evil spirits that afflict them and all of that. Although there's one person who, although nameless, we know who she is. It's Peter's mother. And I think she's someone who's really worth paying attention to. Now, you may have already paid attention to her in the scripture. I know that story, that's one that we probably look at a little differently in the modern world than people did in Jesus' time. And I suspect it's one that women tend to look at a little differently than men. Jesus and his disciples had been out in the synagogue. Jesus had been teaching there, and it had gone pretty well. And so they went back to Peter's home, the home that Peter and his brother Andrew lived in with their families. And they found out that Peter's mother-in-law, who would normally have been fixing dinner, was in bed with a fever. And that constituted a crisis because apparently the disciples, none of them knew how to cook. So Jesus went in to her and he took her hand and he told her to rise, and immediately she was healed. And immediately after that, she went in and started making dinner for them, which my mom, my mom's church follows the same lectionary readings we do, and she said they podcast them, and so they record them a week ahead when they cover those scriptures in Bible study. And she said she didn't say anything, but she had kind of a different reaction to that story. This poor woman has just gotten out of her sick bed. She just had a fever not 30 seconds ago, and you're going to make her fix dinner? Shouldn't you be fixing her dinner, you guys? Didn't Jesus ever teach his disciples how to make a sandwich? I get that. I mean, it's a story that reads differently to us because culture and gender norms were much more rigid in Jesus' time. But I don't know that we should use that to say, well, it's okay to make women the designated constant cooks. And I think when it's done, when the person has just gotten over being sick, it's maybe pushing the limit. Although, to be fair, the gospel doesn't say they made her get up and fix dinner. And I think I might know a different way of looking at that story that might give us some insight into why it went the way it did. Last year, I fell and injured one of my ribs, and it was miserable. It's not a serious injury, but it's very painful. And it was constantly on my mind because if I moved wrong or breathed wrong or did any little thing, I'd get this horrible stab of pain. It was like being imprisoned in my own body because all of the things I was used to doing, all of the things I took for granted, I just couldn't do. Or if I did them, they were a real challenge. There were times there where they told me this will just take a few weeks to heal up. There were times it felt like it was never going to heal up, and I think even towards the end of the process it felt harder and harder to deal with. I felt like my life had been taken away from me, or at least large chunks of it had been taken away from me, and I was never going to get it back. Does that feeling sound familiar? I think to some degree we've all been experiencing that sort of thing over this last year. Since COVID-19 made itself known in this country, we've been limited. Our lives have kind of been put on hold. It's frustrating. We want to be able to travel again. We want to be able to have picnics. We want to be able to go to the beach with a group of friends. We want to be able to sit together in the sanctuary and worship. We want to be able to greet friends with a handshake or a hug and not worry about getting sick or making someone sick. We don't want to constantly be doing the mental math about whether or not we're 6 feet apart. I think everyone is feeling that. And of course, there are people for whom those feelings are just too uncomfortable, and so they get together. They have parties. They have gatherings. They don't wear masks. They take terrible risks and sometimes pay terrible prices because they are so hungry to get back to their regular lives again. And maybe it's even a little harder now. We've got vaccines. We've got an end in sight. We don't know when it's going to be exactly yet, but we know it's coming. And in some ways, that anticipation makes it harder than ever. I think when the day finally comes, when we can throw away the masks and embrace each other, there's going to be such a tremendous feeling of joy throughout the whole world. It'll be amazing. When healing comes, whether to an individual or a group, there's a feeling of relief. There's a feeling of reclaiming those parts of your life that you have not been able to experience for so long. There's a deep sense of gratitude. What happens when that day comes? Once you're able to do things, what do you do? Well, the first day my ribs felt better, I played with the idea of doing a cartwheel. I didn't do it. I'm not great at doing that even under optimal conditions, and I figured maybe don't take the chance. But the feeling, the desire to get out and do something was very strong. I did a few things to celebrate, but I'll tell you, one of the things that meant the most to me was being able to come back into the church and work again. Working here is one of the things that matters most to me. It's something that helps to give my life meaning. And I think, I imagine that a lot of you can really relate to that. We do what we do not just to make money to pay the bills, but we try to choose those things that we do that make us feel fulfilled, that give us purpose. And when you can start doing it again, it's kind of like reclaiming your purpose in life, and that can feel so good. And I suspect that's what's going on with Peter's mother. The Bible doesn't tell us really anything about her, but the fever took her out of her regular life. When Jesus healed her, for her, the best way to celebrate that was to return to things that she did, that she valued, that she was proud of, that gave her life meaning. And one of those was taking care of the meals for her family and their guests. I don't think she felt like she had an obligation to get up and start cooking right away as much as she found joy in doing it because she hadn't been able to, and now she was set free. Something that I'm proud of about this church is that even as restricted as we've been over the last year, we still have clung to our purpose. We still have found ways to make a difference in the community, to care for each other, to call and to visit and to help our neighbors who are more isolated than we are. We found ways of doing worship together. We found all kinds of resources we never knew we had. This week, we're even starting a program to help get people registered for vaccinations, get appointments. We've never stopped serving. Although we have been limited, and I think when the day comes when that limitation is lifted, we'll feel so free. And I feel confident that we'll rejoice in our freedom. We'll celebrate in the same way that Peter's mother did when her fullness of life was restored to her. We will get up. We will get busy. We will care for others, just like Peter's mother-in-law.